I was heavily addicted to video games at the age of 17, and I became a millionaire by 21, and I did it by using my video game addiction. Now I'm going to explain how, but if you can't sit through a quick 10 whatever minute video this is on how to do this, you're screwed. So just lock in, full screen, pay attention, and I'll explain how I did it.
So the good news is that if you're addicted to video games, it's going to be incredibly easy for you to become successful in business and make loads of money. And the reason behind this is because in your brain, you have got something called a gaming circuit. And this is the part of your brain responsible and dedicated to the gaming process. And the reason that you have this gaming circuit and the reason that you can play video games all day, every day without any break or any problem, with where really your only your ability to keep you awake keeps you going, is three things. We have status, we have achievement, and we have progress. And if you're addicted to video games, it doesn't really mean you're addicted to the games. It means you're addicted to these three things. Because think about it. You're not playing the game to play the game. You're playing the game to either achieve status, so high social value, and I'll explain what that means in a second. Achievement, where you feel like you're actually worthwhile something because you've done something or achieved something, or progress, which is the sense of progressing towards the achievement. And this gets really interesting because your status is basically your social value. Because most video games that are smart, they encourage a feeling of community, and they give you levels, and then you can level and compare yourself against other people. And what this allows us to do is it creates this sort of arbitrary but very much real in the brain's mind sense of social hierarchy. And the status of a video game, like a League of Legends rank, or what level you are on RuneScape, or what sword you have on World of Warcraft or whatever, or what rank you are on Call of Duty or kill death ratio, all these games, competitive games, they track status. And status is basically just social value. And so the reason as a man that you want social value is because social value, if you have high social value, it leads to a stronger chance of fun time. Let's call it that. And so the cool thing to understand is that your brain, basically, the reason it has this gaming circuit is to achieve social value. The way that we get status in video games is through achievement, and the way we make achievements happen is through progress. This is awesome for you. This is good news for you. It might suck that you're addicted to video games and that it's this arbitrary thing where you've got this high social value and people are like, this guy's so good at this game, but it doesn't make you any money. It keeps you poor, it makes you lazy, and it makes you fat, and it makes your social relationships fall out the window, and then you end up with no girlfriend, and that's bad. The good news is that the gaming circuit's there, because if the gaming circuit wasn't there, then we have no leverage or no motivation to actually do anything. But what's really interesting here is the gaming circuit can either latch on to one of two things. It can latch on to games, or it can latch on to business. And this is really cool because, right now you're in this camp here. You're in the games camp, where your gaming circuit, in order for it to get what it wants, and in order for you to achieve this social value by making achievements happen, by making progress, you're going to the easiest route. You're going to video games. But what you want to do is force it to go to the business side. Now the question then becomes like, well, yeah, sure, okay, that's great, but how do I get my gaming circuit to focus on business as opposed to video games? Well, that's a good question. And the answer to that question is incredibly straightforward. It's removal. And what you need to do, and trust me, I know this works because I did it, is remove video games and then start a business at the same time. And you might not know where to start or how to start or what to do, but if you start the business at the same time you remove the video games, then what happens is all of this latent neurological energy, that was going into the video game now has no choice but to go into the business. And this is a fantastic thing because energy, like in physics, we say that if you have energy cannot be created and it cannot be destroyed. Okay? All that can happen is it can be converted or it can be transferred. So if we have like light energy coming off of this light, then you can't destroy the energy, you can't create it. It either is transferred into heat or kinetic energy or something else, right? And so when we remove video games completely and start a business at the same time, then what happens is our play circuit needs somewhere to go. Like this part of us in our brain, it has to go somewhere. Because if you quit the video games and you just try and quit the video games, then all that's going to happen is you're going to pick up another bad habit or somewhere else. Some people, when they quit video games, they start playing sports. And sports competitive sports is another example of where this gaming circuit can go. The problem is a lot of people are trying to do business whilst also playing video games. And what that does is it spreads your gaming circuit and it distributes it in a way that's way too thin. Because to get business results, you need to be like 90 to 100% in. But if you've got video games to think about and business to think about, out, you've got this battle that you're fighting, and you're always going to default to the easier option, which is video games, because your gaming circuit is trying to optimize for pleasure with the least amount of pain. And video games are intense pleasure, intense dopaminergic release, and very, very little pain and very little calorific expense. To play a video game, all you have to do is click and tap. And that doesn't really cost much in terms of calories, in terms of energy, in terms of pain. Maybe you get like a pain in your finger or wrist or something, but that's it. But business, well, now we've got the pain of having to do the work, and we've got to think critically, and we've got to get rejected, and we've got to build things, and it really sucks. But your brain will justify that if you completely strip the video games. And this is how you also guarantee or have a higher guarantee or a lower chance of relapse. So if you want to quit the games and start making money, do it and then start a business. Because then all of your brain will start going into this, because you have become addicted not to video games. Remember, this is the key point here, is video games are the vehicle that you currently use to achieve status and achievement and progress. So the game is how you get these things. And so everyone says, oh, I'm addicted to video games. It's like, no, you're not. You're addicted to the feeling of making progress towards an achievement that elevates your social status, so that in some world you can have more stuff that happens in the bedroom, right? That's what you want, and that's why you play the game. And it might not make sense to you, because you're like, well, why would my brain want that? Because just being good at RuneScape isn't going to get me laid. But this is the thing, is your brain isn't smart. I don't mean that in an offensive way. I mean that as a broad term for everyone. Our brains are incredibly animalistic by nature, and they're not intelligent. So like your brain it will not distinguish the difference between IRL, real life status of having a mansion and a watch and a car, and status on RuneScape. It uses the same mental comprehension mechanism, the same primitive ancient system tracks status across these different modes of exertion, right? And so it can't tell the difference how you feel when you hang out with your friends on RuneScape with, you know, your clan, and you're the highest level and you've got all of the resources. How you feel in that moment is akin exactly to how you will feel when you become the richest person in your neighborhood. The same system tracks both neurological responses. The same thing is true for when you make an achievement or when you make progress. You know, in a video game, you make little bits of progress, and it feels good. Your brain uses the same mental comprehension mechanism to track progress in business. The only thing is that business registers as more painful because it requires more physical exertion. It requires more calorific potential for you to expend to start receiving the dopamine. And that's why it's so significantly easier for you to game than it is to work, because your brain is motivated by pleasure and pain. And what that means is it wants to mitigate pain and maximize pleasure. And the discrepancy between this dichotomy is the validity of how much work you'll do, if that makes sense. So now that you understand the basic neurochemistry here, I want to talk you through a little strategy that I deployed that worked really well for me, called dopamine trail, or dopamine trailing. So when you play a video game, and you should be familiar all too much with this, because this is what you've been doing. When you play a video game, what happens is you want to receive big reward, okay? And this could be represented by levels, it could be represented by items like a sword, it could be represented by a rank, etc., etc. You're striving towards this big goal, right? So for example, if it's League of Legends, maybe you want to become a challenger player. If it's Minecraft, maybe you want to defeat the Ender Dragon, although maybe not so much in Minecraft because there's stuff you can do after that, but you get my point, right? All these games have a big end goal. And your objective by playing the game is to basically, to get the goal. But what these games do, a lot of people would think that's where people get their value from. Because what would make sense is it's like, well, okay, if people just want to achieve the big goal, and if people just want to, level up and rank up as fast as possible, then why not just give that to them immediately, really easily, as soon as they start the video game? Because then surely compressing the time frame over which someone achieves what they want is, going to result in more sales and better player retention. But this isn't true. But let me tell you a story. So I used to play RuneScape. And for those of you that have never played RuneScape, it's basically kind of like World of Warcraft, just very straightforward, achievement-based game. On RuneScape, it is painfully slow and painfully difficult to achieve this. To get to level 99 on all these different skills, and to get all of these, these things. And I used to play it, and I used to grind it out. But then there was also another type of thing called a RuneScape private server. A RuneScape private server was a server where you could go on and code yourself or with a group of people, and you could, instead of taking maybe like a year or 2 years to get to the goal, you could get there in like 30 seconds. to the point where you could write this code or you could go to a bank and you could pull out all the end game items and you have basically completed the game in like a minute. And what I can tell you about RuneScape private servers, they're fun to play for about an hour and then you lose all interest in these things and how these happen. So this is why these video game companies structure their games the way they do, and it's why it takes so long and it's such an arduous, painful process, because the harder it is to achieve the goal, the more meaningful the goal is. And so here's how you do it. So when you start your business or when you start working on something other than video games, what you want to do is you want to lay what we call a dopamine trail, because this is what video games do. But you need to engineer it for yourself, because you as a video game addict, you have a gaming circuit, which means that you respond well to the structure of video games, which is basically dopaminergic or dopamine trails. And the way this works is we have these little rewards on the way to the goal, and there's loads of them, you know, and sometimes they even branch off a little bit, right? And so what this looks like is you're basically jumping between objectives to get to your goal. And we know we can just do this and it goes here and then here and then here. And this is called a dopamine trail. And this is an incredibly powerful thing, because what it does is it simulates the idea of achieving the big goal on a smaller scale. And this is basically called progress. And so, you know, when you start a new video game, in the first, you know, couple of hours of you playing the game's going to litter you with little small levels of progression. And so maybe you just level up ever so slightly, or maybe you unlock a slightly better weapon, or maybe, you know, your rank goes up above whatever the hell, right? It's constant, consistent feedback, and this is a sense of progress. And so what you want to do is you want to learn how to do dopamine trailing in your business efforts. Because what a lot of people do when they start a business is they celebrate the little things like they are the big thing. And what this does is it completely strips you of motivation to keep going, because, you know, if you're working on a business for social status or, you know, a sense of elevated achievement, and let's say you sign your first client, or you go on Shopify, you do dropshipping, you get a couple of sales. A lot of people treat the first couple of sales or the first, you know, couple of clients as if they've made it big and they've achieved their result of becoming a millionaire. Understand, your brain does not understand, neurologically, neurochemically, does not understand the difference between becoming a millionaire and making $100 yourself, at least your first $100. It will feel just as pleasurable to hit the big goal as it will the little goal at the start. It's just because it's perceived as more valuable in the future, you're motivated to move towards it. Dopamine is the chemical of leading, not actually achieving. You don't care about the achievement, you care about working towards it. And I know this is true because I live in a mansion on the Palm in Dubai. And I wanted to live in a mansion on the Palm in Dubai for maybe 3-4 years. It was my goal for years. I moved in on the day. I had this massive dopamine spike. I felt amazing. I was walking around listening to motivational music. I felt great. Woke up a couple of days later. I didn't really care for the house. Not that I'm happy to be here, but once you achieve something, you don't care anymore. Like you need to find something to push you further. And I had this weird dopamine deficit state where once I got into the house and I got my car and I started buying the clothes and I had everything I wanted, I'd achieved the status and the achievement and the progress I wanted to achieve. And so I was suddenly stripped of my motivation and was no longer motivated to work. Now, fortunately enough, I dug myself out by setting a new big goal over here and then resetting my dopamine trail along the way. This is huge. If you learn to do this, you'll make a ton of money because you're probably really good at playing video games. You can play video games for 12 hours a day with no problem at all and level up and rank up and make progress and be consistent and build your social life around it and build your identity around it. And you respond well to this sort of conditioning. If you can learn to just change the vehicle that your brain attaches to, that's all you've got to do. Because in your brain, you have these things called dopamine receptors. They look like this in your brain, these little like mushroom style things. And they have these little circles, right? And a dopamine receptor, basically, in your brain, dopamine is released. We'll use these little things. Your dopamine receptors, they get attached to specific things. Whatever your dopamine receptors are attached to is what will feel easy. So for example, I can work for 10 to 12 hours a day and I fucking love it. I have no problem in any way, shape or form with doing the work and I love it. And that's because I've stripped myself of everything pleasurable and all I do is work. And so what has happened is my dopamine receptors have become attached attached and associated with work, which makes work incredibly straightforward and easy for me. And so this is how you take a video gaming addiction and you flip it on its head and you use it to make loads of money. Because nothing will motivate you and reward you more like the feeling of status, like the feeling of achievement, and like the feeling of progress, and also other things like competition and stuff like that, and maybe even social aspects as well. Trust me, all you work for is those things. You're not this highly intelligent, sentient being. You're just an animal. You're a creature who just wants basic psychological and biological needs fulfilled. And if you can learn to associate the fulfillment of those needs with something hard like business, just by removing the games and removing the other things that you do, you're going to crush it. Another example as well is watching series. Like if you watch a Netflix series, then like your brain is now partly dedicated to that series and trying to problem solve and stuff like that. When you just work, if you can just resist the urge to play the games and just work for like 90 days, you'll literally reset your dopaminergic system, you'll reset your brain, and you'll be so motivated to work that becoming a millionaire will just be easy. And I know it works because I literally did it. I played bloody League of Legends, I played Minecraft, I played RuneScape, and I played nearly every video game under the sun. And I was heavily addicted to these games. Like heavily. I would play for like, it was being consumed my life. And then one day I had this bright idea and the rest is history. And now I'm rich by the standards of modern society. So that's everything. If you like this video, then you can just subscribe and there's more coming. Bye.